across America. National monuments and other high-rises have been evacuated for the day as well as part of the precaution. Still, no claim of responsibility by any one group. The only visible signs of celebration have been on the West Bank. The Palestinian people, who believe that the United States and Israel are one, have been cheering and handing out candy and celebrating, while their leaders have been condemning this attack. NBC's David Bloom is in Midtown Manhattan now with a view over the city skyline. And David, it is still stunning for those of us who live here to look behind you and not see the Twin Trade Towers.
Well, Tom, it is a horrific scene behind me looking from Midtown Manhattan to Lower Manhattan. And if anything, it's gotten more disheartening as the hours have passed. In this sense, the billowing cloud of smoke and debris that you see behind me is in fact growing. More smoke, more debris floating up into the air. The best estimates, Tom, that the New York Police Department is making at this hour in terms of casualties is only to say that they expect them to go into the thousands in terms of dead and injured. We know that the victims are being shipped to individual hospitals, not merely here in Manhattan, but in the entire tri-state area, in Connecticut, in New Jersey as well. One hospital, St. Vincent's in Greenwich Village, reports simply being overwhelmed with casualties. They say that they've put out an all-points bulletin for burn specialists and plastic surgeons. They need all the help they get, and it's no doubt all the hospitals do here in Manhattan. Here is the sequence of events, starting with the first terrorist attack this morning. The first plane attacks the World Trade Center's South Tower at approximately 8:42 Eastern Time. Airline officials say at least 2 American Airlines flights and 2 United Airlines flights were hijacked today, and that the attack planes were the hijacked domestic flights. Roughly 21 minutes later, approximately 9:03 Eastern Time, the second large jetliner can be seen taking dead aim at the World Trade Center's North Tower. Emergency officials estimate 20,000 or more people may have been inside the 2 110-story buildings at the time of the attacks. Eyewitnesses report victims falling and in some cases jumping from the 2 buildings. At approximately 9:40 a.m. in Washington, D.C., a third hijacked plane crashes into the Pentagon in a burst of flames, one side of the building collapsing. Non-essential personnel from federal buildings, including the White House and the U.S. Capitol, are evacuated. 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. An unknown number of people still trapped inside. 1/2 hour later, at approximately 10:28 a.m., the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. Rubble, debris spreading for blocks. In a separate but apparently related crash, a fourth hijacked plane, a Boeing 767, crashes in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. The FAA closes all domestic airports, shutting down all U.S. airspace. At this hour, airline and FAA officials believe the 4 hijacked planes include American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, bound from Boston to Los Angeles with 90 passengers and crew aboard, crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77, bound from Washington Dulles to LAX with 64 passengers and crew, believed to have been the plane, crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles with 65 people on board. By early accounts, the plane which crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower. And finally, United Airlines Flight 93, the Boeing 757, which crashed in western Pennsylvania, carrying 45 passengers and crew. As to who might be responsible for this series of terrorist attacks, as you mentioned, Tom, has yet no claim of responsibility, but we certainly can tell you what senior U.S. intelligence officials, both in this administration and in the Clinton administration, are telling us, that the prime suspect is clearly the Saudi-born terrorist Osama bin Laden. One official told us that only he has the capability, the experience, and the motivation to carry out an attack like this. But again, that is just their initial speculation, finger-pointing. We clearly don't know at this hour who's responsible for this devastating and horrific attack.
Thank you very much, NBC's David Bloom. It goes without saying that whoever is responsibility, this is an act of war declared on the United States, a terrorist act of war, unprecedented in our nation's history. The United States was attacked, of course, 60 years ago this year at Pearl Harbor. 2,400 people were killed. The Japanese military attacking an American military installation that got us involved in World War II. But this terrorist war They used innocent Americans on commercial airliners to attack other innocent Americans, and they struck at the heart of our civilian life in New York City. And they've caused great psychological damage across the country as well, say nothing of their attack on the symbol of our military strength, that is the Pentagon. And they took innocent people to their deaths in Pittsburgh in the crash of that hijacked airliner as well. NBC's Rahema Ellis is down near the World Trade Center. Rahema?
Tom, I am 4 blocks from the World Trade Center. The sky is dark with thick black smoke. Apparently, there are still fires burning. Some of the emergency workers told me that they cannot get into the exact area of the World Trade Center to help people whom they fear are trapped in the rubble because the fires are still burning, in some instances, out of control. Just a few moments ago, and just only 2 blocks from here, we were at the NYU Downtown Hospital. It is the only emergency room in the lower portion of Manhattan. It was the place where the first victims from this blast were taken, and hospital officials tell us they have turned their cafeteria into a triage area. They have people lined, and they say victims are wall to wall with inside that cafeteria and all throughout the hospital. Everyone has been called into service to assist in this blast. I talked with a man who was able to walk out of the hospital. His name was Peter DeCerbo. He was on the 47th floor of the World Trade Tower, number 1. He said when the first explosion occurred, he said he felt the building shake. He became frightened, as did all of his co-workers, he said. They didn't know what to do. Finally, he said, and quickly, they started to run down the stairs, 47 flights. And he said he actually carried a woman on his shoulders down those 47 flights with him. Another man who was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange had come out of the building and was standing. He looked up, and he literally saw the second tower of the World Trade Tower come crashing to the ground. He said he saw it coming down, and then he and hundreds of people around him started to run. When he got to a point of some near safety, the man, who's 37 years old, said he dropped to his knees and he started to pray because he thought that he was going to be dead. As one emergency worker said to me, he said, "Do you know what day this is?" And I said, "It's September 11th. He said, "Yes, it's 911. And all of New York right now is in a state of 911. Tom?
All right, thank you very much. NBC's Rahema Ellis with a vivid account of what has been going on down there. We should also point out that we're getting a number of...
This is a News 4 special report.
New York, of course, the financial center of this great country. Washington, D.C., the seat of government, and both of us have been hit today by terrorist attacks.
Mayor Tony Williams has declared a state of emergency in the district. We go live now to Jackie Benson on Freedom Plaza with the latest on what's happening in our city. Jackie?
We're going to show you what it looks like. We're on East Street, show you 14th Street down there, a sight you will see all over downtown. Not today, a D.C. police car blocking traffic from going any closer to the White House. D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams spoke just a few moments ago at the Reeves Center in Northwest Washington. Here is some of what he had to say.
Our first priority is to be able to respond effectively to the emergency situations as they arise. To that end, and to ensure that we have the highest level of preparedness, I have declared a state of emergency in the District of Columbia so that emergency vehicles can move throughout our neighborhoods and so that in the event of an incident here in the district, we are fully prepared. I'm also communicating regularly with the White House and have the full support of our federal emergency agencies as well as the cooperation of the D.C. National Guard. I'd like to ask our citizens to remain calm and to work with us to get vehicles off the street as quickly as possible. Unless you are emergency personnel, medical and public safety professionals, unless you have some specific business of picking your kids up from school or the like, please stay at home. We're also...
Now, the state of emergency gives the mayor the authority to mobilize the D.C. National Guard, as you heard him say. It also allows him to request citizens, as he has done so, to stay indoors if possible and to curtail all non-essential trips. It also allows him to deputize special police to direct traffic at various intersections throughout the city because obviously D.C. police do not have enough officers to put someone in every corner. Now, the mayor was asked, would what's happening here today affect the upcoming IMF summit, the trouble and the massive police mobilization that was expected at that time. He said he is in the process of consulting with city attorneys to approach the federal government to see if they might possibly consider canceling or postponing that upcoming International Monetary Fund and World Bank meeting later this September. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Jackie Benson.
Thank you.
The nerve center of our nation's military, of course, is the Pentagon, and it was also a target of the terrorist attack today. There have been casualties from the attack on the Pentagon. Sarah Lee joins us now from Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington. Sarah?
Good afternoon, Jim. I'm standing here outside the emergency room where, as you can see, I'll step out of the way of the camera in just a moment. You can see the medical personnel is poised and ready for more patients to be coming in here. This is a place where I guess the walking wounded have been coming in, as it's very close to the Pentagon. We're told that there are about 26 people here being treated at this time, ranging from minor injuries to somewhat critical. These are all, I'm told, Pentagon employees, military as well as civilian. I'm going to just step out of the camera here so you can take a look at all the medical personnel that are poised and ready. They've got the stretchers and the gurneys and the wheelchairs lined up to be expecting more injured here. Just about 10 minutes ago, an ambulance pulled up here. A gentleman got out. He was walking. He told us, I'm breathing fine. He had his shirt off, appeared to have some kind of heart monitor patches on him. Off camera, when reporters asked the ambulance driver if he was going back to the Pentagon, he said, oh yeah, I'm going back there. So many more people expected to be brought to area hospitals. Earlier also we did see some, it looked like to be either family members or people looking to give blood walked up to the emergency room. We're talking with some of the medical personnel earlier, shortly thereafter left, but which brings up a good point that a lot of blood will be needed at area hospitals. If not, you can't get in today to do it because I'm told that it will be very difficult to get into some places today. Certainly there will be blood needed in the area throughout the week, so people should certainly keep that on their schedule to give blood if they can. Again, we are out at Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington. Back to you guys in studio.
All right, Sarah Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Lee. Some of the other casualties from the Pentagon have been taken to Washington Hospital Center. Chris Gordon is live on the telephone from there right now. Chris, what are you seeing at the hospital center?
Doreen, 7 victims have been brought here with burns, both on their skin and internal from breathing in smoke. 5 are in critical condition. They are having a blood collection drive. There are 5,500 employees of this hospital. Many are volunteering to give blood. But the difficulty and frustration here is that they have 4 medevac helicopters. They have reports that there are more burn victims at the Pentagon that need treatment. And because of the restriction on flying, they cannot take the helicopters to pick up these victims and bring them here. They could accommodate 20 more people here in the burn unit. And the frustration is the restriction on flying has grounded and left on standby these 4 medevac helicopters. That's the situation live from the Washington Hospital Center.
All right, thank you. Chris Gordon reporting live.
We have some other information to share with you now. Navy Lieutenant Commander Kate Mueller is asking all on-duty Navy and Marine workers who were in the Pentagon this morning to please call and report their status. These workers are asked to call 877-663-6772. Once again, 877-663-6772. That is not a general information line. It is only for Navy and Marine personnel who are now in the Pentagon or who were in the Pentagon this morning.
They obviously need some, they're trying to account for the casualties inside the Pentagon, and they want to hear from the people who were there and who are okay. Families and friends who need information about the United Airlines flights should call this number. United Airlines, 800-932-8555. There are 2 United Airlines planes involved in the hijackings today. The telephone number to call for those is 800-932-8555. If you have access to a computer, you can also go to the United Airlines website. That internet address is www.united.com.
Also, American Airlines has a hotline for friends and families to get information about Flights 11 and Flight 77. That number is 800-245-0999. Once again, 800-245-0999.
One of the planes involved today was an American Airlines flight out of Dulles headed for Los Angeles. So
that was Flight 77.
That's right. We also understand that nationwide bus service has been disrupted because of the attack. Greyhound has halted intercity bus service through much of the country. Service along much of the East Coast has been canceled. All terminals within a mile of federal office buildings have been closed. Officials do not yet know how long this Greyhound bus service interruption will be in effect.
Mary Alice Salinas is available to us now. Mary Alice, where are you?
Jim, I'm at Dulles International Airport right now, where, as you know, one of the flights originated this morning, according to sources. I'm going to give you a little look at what the scene is like at this point. I'll tell you about earlier in just a minute, but imagine this is the walkway in front of Dulles International Airport right now. It is a desert. It is so incredibly quiet. Earlier when we got here this morning, there were people mostly outside. They were confused. They were asking questions about what happened. Some of them just know they were diverted, for instance, from National to come here, then learned what happened. One passenger said that the pilot, when he landed, went and let them know in a very tearful, emotional voice that there had been some planes that crashed and that there were fatalities. Earlier this morning, I want to give you a look at the flags out here flying at half staff. Those were brought down earlier this morning as word continued to come about more and more aircraft that were crashing here. And so those were brought down earlier. There were a lot of emotional scenes. One young woman was actually in tears. She had just been out of college. This was her first year working. She traveled a lot, and she was just so emotionally distraught about all these threats and all these catastrophes that had happened involving airline passengers. People were running to the phones trying to call home to let their loved ones know that they were all right. Now, the other eerie thing about this is, of course, how quiet it is. The skies, it's such a gorgeous sky. It's so still and quiet, considering it is an airport in the middle of the work week. Planes are stagnant. They're just sitting out there. And the other, I think, very, very eerie thing that has happened here is that when you do hear any aircraft, everyone sort of jumps because of the threat and the catastrophes that have been happening all morning long. The aircrafts, once they come around, we see that they're fighter jets and they're military helicopters. And so you know they're not on a practice run. This is not a training mission. This is not an air show. They've been circling Dulles International Airport here, of course, on a mission. So it has been a very eerie, a very emotional morning here. One of the aircraft, again, originating here, some of the passengers saying they were brought here from Washington National. So we talked to some people. We'll have more on that. Some passengers who actually passed over the World Trade Towers 30 minutes before they were brought here, landed, and found out that they were completely gone. Back to you.
Mary Alice, family members of people who were on that Flight 77 that was one of the planes hijacked, what are they being told to do? Do you know?
Actually, no information from airport officials is coming out from here. I believe that is happening in Washington, where a spokesperson is out there. Really, everything is shuttered inside here. Everything's shut down. The people in the office here couldn't say anything. All the information is coming out of there. And it's just as quiet, in fact, more quiet inside. There are just a few ticket agents at some of the counters who are giving information to passengers, but it's quiet. Everyone's gone from here.
All right, thank you. Mary Alice Salinas reporting live from Dulles Airport.
In line with that issue, Doreen, once again, American Airlines has a hotline up if you want information about that flight, Flight 77. The number is 800-245-0999.
National Airport is also closed down at this hour. Let's go live to Tony Dorsey, who can tell us what the scene is like over there. Tony?
Well, Doreen, normally this time of day it is hustle and bustle here at Reagan National Airport, but look behind me. You can see that there is nobody here. The only ones here are allowed at the airport terminals right now are security officials. In fact, we even had to show our ID, picture ID, all the news media did as they arrived up here at the terminal. Now, we have some videotape that was shot here earlier, just after 9 o'clock. the Airports Authority made a decision not only to close Reagan National and Dulles International, but to evacuate both of the airports. People were told to get out of the buildings. Planes on the runway were brought back to the terminals and evacuated, and thousands of people were forced into the streets. People carried or rolled their luggage out of here toward Crystal City and Route 1. Traffic was backed up into Crystal City as road traffic, taxis, and people trying to pick up passengers had to turn around. The evacuation was calm and orderly, but there was a lot of confusion. We spoke to just some of the evacuees this morning. Listen in.
We were on the plane, on the runway, just getting ready to take off when the pilot came on and said there's a permanent hold, we have to wait here. And I was sitting in the window that you could see the Pentagon, and I saw, I assume it was the Pentagon, the smoke begin to rise in a huge black cloud, and then they brought the plane back to the gate and asked everybody to leave the building immediately.
For us, we were evacuated from the airport here at Washington, evacuated from our plane.
What was that like? Describe it.
It was an orderly evacuation, but people wanted to get out and away from the aircraft as quickly as possible.
You were in the plane?
Yeah, Northwest. We were number 2 for takeoff, and then they shut down the engines and they said that there's a national emergency and they're returning all the flights.
Well, this is Tony Dorsey, live back here at National Airport with Jonathan Gaffney, who is a spokesperson for the Airports Authority. Big question now, and you may not be able to answer this, but when will the airports reopen?
Tony, we have said that we will be closed until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Frank, I think the probably more appropriate question is when the nation will start flying again, and that's a decision obviously will come from DOT, FAA, and the administration. In the meantime, we're kind of closed. As you just mentioned, we've evacuated until we completely clear kind of what has happened, that it's over, and that we can safely kind of get people back in here, get their bags if they can, hopefully as soon as possible. But it's kind of until we all know exactly what has happened, those prudent course decisions kind of keep the place closed, keep everybody out of here, and assess it as we go along.
I've seen security both here at the terminals and up in the air. I've seen, as we showed in Mary Alice's live report, you've got F-16s flying overhead, making sure the airways are secure. The situation obviously very tense.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously a tremendous catastrophe when you have 4 airplanes that have seem to be crashed on purpose. Obviously that shakes the entire industry, and obviously we're concerned about it, and collectively we're going to have to kind of find out what happened so we can start flying again.
We can smell the smoke blowing from the Pentagon. Yes. Here. The smoke still billowing up over the Pentagon not far away from here. Tell us, in terms of security, what went wrong? Have you got any kind of a handle what went wrong at Dulles Airport?
Tony, obviously we have no idea until a thorough investigation is done, which has probably started already. We have no idea how that happened. Planes come and go all the time, passengers come and go. How that specifically happened, as well as the other 3, is something that is beyond my knowledge right now how it happened.
So you hope to reopen by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Well, our plan is to assess everything that we know by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning and make a decision, but that will kind of go hand in hand with, or really subordinate to, whatever the decision is. Right now in the United States, all commercial aviation evidently has been grounded, which we've never done before. So that obviously that's a precedent-setting event. How we follow on to that is we'll just have to see how it goes.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Gaffney with the Airports Authority here at Reagan National Airport, where, as I said, it is a virtual ghost town. If you are thinking about picking up anyone at the airport today, Dulles, Reagan National, or BWI, of course, all of our regional airports are shut down indefinitely. They're going to reevaluate 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, and so you just have to stay close to the news to find out what happens next. Back to you in the studio.
Tony Dorsey.
Our routine this morning was shattered when we heard about a plane crashing into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Then just a few minutes later, we were shocked to hear that there was another one. But it was New York. And then the terror came home to the Pentagon. Megan McGrath is there now. Megan?
Well, if you take a look behind me, you can see that smoke still rises off the Pentagon here, and you can see the devastation and get an idea for just how strong the impact was. It shook the building. People who weren't even in that section of the Pentagon say that they felt the vibration, they felt the impact when the plane slammed into the side of the building. Now, Rear Admiral Craig Quigley, a Pentagon spokesperson, just gave a briefing not too long ago. He says this is a full assault on the United States of America. The U.S. military is in threat condition Delta. That's threat condition 4, the highest alert possible. Now, F-16s from the D.C. Air National Guard have been patrolling the skies above Washington. We have been seeing them periodically through the area. We are also seeing quite a bit of helicopter traffic, U.S. Army helicopters, some medevac helicopters, but mainly military helicopters landing in the grassy area in front of the Pentagon. Now, they are doing their best to get to the people that may be trapped inside, but because of the intensity of the fire, and apparently the fire was just extremely intense and it was spreading throughout the interior of the building, they were not able to get the search and rescue crews inside the building until a little bit before 2 o'clock this afternoon because it was just too dangerous. The building was unstable because they had that section that collapsed. The fire and the heat was so intense that it would pose a threat to the emergency workers who went in there. So just a little before 2 o'clock, that's when they sent the search and rescue folks into the building. And of course, the primary concern being that there are people who are trapped inside there and desperately need medical attention. And so they are trying to get to those people to get them the medical attention that they need. Now, there has been kind of a triage area set up in front of the Pentagon here. This is the southwest side, the E-ring. Southwest E-ring is where the impact occurred. Now, apparently, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was in his office at the time that the plane went into the side of the Pentagon. He was not injured. In fact, he was able to actually help a number of the injured to get to gurneys and to get to ambulances. And he is currently still inside the Pentagon. He's in the National Military Command Center, which is inside the Pentagon. That center is where all of the top military personnel meet in crisis situations like this. The center was not destroyed. It is still intact, although we are told by the Pentagon spokesperson that it is extremely smoky in there, so certainly not terrific conditions, but they are in there and they are watching over things and coordinating their efforts from inside the Pentagon. Now, Rear Admiral Craig Quigley, the Pentagon spokesman who gave that briefing a short time ago, he was also inside the building at the time that the plane impacted the side of the building, and he gives a first-hand account of what it was like, what he saw.
Washington, D.C., we are at threat condition Delta. That is the highest condition that we can go to. That is the absolutely appropriate thing to do given the events of this morning. What seems to have happened is that we had an aircraft intentionally fly into the Pentagon. For those of you with cameras, you can see the spot behind me. There were intense fires following the aircraft's impact into the building. Arlington Search and Rescue personnel are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense. The fires are still burning in the Pentagon, at least in that vicinity. We have a variety, too many to even mention, of local first responders, fire departments, police departments, you name it, that have rushed to the aid of the Pentagon here.
And there are 23,000 people who work inside the Pentagon. We don't know at this time how many people were injured or how many people were killed in this situation. Certainly there was a loss of life, but we just don't have any idea how many people were inside in that particular area at the time that this happened this morning. Again, it is the southwest E-ring. That is the sector where the plane impacted the building. Again, search and rescue just a little while ago, less than an hour, about 40 minutes ago, gaining access to the interior of the building because they still had fires, they still had quite a bit of heat, quite a bit of smoke, so they just couldn't send the rescue personnel inside the building until now because it simply was not safe. Now, of course, a lot of people very, very concerned about their loved ones who work here at the Pentagon, frantically trying to find out if they're okay. I know that there's been a lot of difficulty getting cell phone calls out, so people have tried to call their loved ones, have not been able to get through on cell phones. There is a phone number that people from the Navy personnel and folks with the Marine Corps who work at the Pentagon, that they should call, just to call this number, let officials know that they are okay, and let them know where they are. Here's the phone number. It's 1-877 663-6772. Again, this is not a general information number. Please do not call it just to get the latest update on the situation. This is a number which is intended for use by Navy and Marine Corps personnel who work inside the Pentagon so that they can get word to their families about their whereabouts, their status. They're really trying to track down who was injured at this point. And of course, considering the scene and just the chaotic nature of it, it's very difficult to track down who is injured, who is inside. So that will help out. Reporting live from the Pentagon, back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Megan McGrath.
We want to let you know there has been concern throughout the morning about other flights that were still in the air and had not landed yet. We understand now that all domestic flights have now landed safely. And we also are just getting word that all domestic flights in this country will be grounded until at least noon tomorrow. We can report to you that flags flying at half-staff all over the city and the area today. Also, Red Cross officials are asking that you wait until tomorrow in an effort to donate blood. Please wait until tomorrow. That is our broadcast for right now. For what's happening in our local area, now we rejoin Tom Brokaw and network coverage of this day of tragic events. We'll be back later.
Washington. From Boston to Los Angeles, that was American Airlines Flight 11. That was the first one to go into the World Trade Center. 92 people on board. Flight 77 and another American Airlines flight was headed from Dulles to Los Angeles with 62 on board. Those flights from the capital to the West Coast always have prominent people on board. Flights 175, United Airlines, Boston to Los Angeles, 65 on board. And Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, 45 on board. All transcontinental flights with a heavy load of fuel. This is Mayor Giuliani of New York City. Let's join his news conference live.
It's something that we've had nightmares about, but probably thought wouldn't happen. My heart goes out to all of the innocent victims of this horrible and vicious acts of terrorism. And our focus now has to be on saving as many lives as possible. We have hundreds of police officers and firefighters who are engaging in rescue efforts in Lower Manhattan. I want to thank Governor Pataki for the incredible cooperation and coordination, and including deploying the National Guard that will be available to relieve our police officers and firefighters and emergency workers in the next couple of hours. The governor and I just spoke to the President of the United States. The coordination with the federal government from the time of the first attack has been excellent, including closing off the airspace around Manhattan and doing everything that can possibly be done in the face of this barbaric act to make the city secure. And we will strive now very hard to save as many people as possible and to send a message that the city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get. And then, Governor, thank you very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. First step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk, and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the President, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, while this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude, we will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any
Mayor
of us
Giuliani
can
and
bear.
Governor Pataki, the two Republican leaders of this state, joined together here in this day of common tragedy for them and dealing with a crisis of unbelievable proportions for both of them. Is this city has been struck in an act of war by terrorists. You're looking now at the Manhattan Bridge, which leads out of lower Manhattan into the various boroughs. That one going over into Brooklyn. Those of you who come to New York always remember the Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Williamsburg Bridge in that sequence from the lower part of the city on BMW. These are people who didn't have access to subways or cars because the tunnels are closed, and they're walking home, as any number of people are. New York, as Governor Pataki said, is so diverse in so many ways, but it is always united with the enormous sense of pride and survival and people helping each other as they are today. And that is the lower end of Manhattan, one of the great cities in the world that has been struck in an act of war today by two hijacked airliners, the hijackers unknown. Richard Shelby of Alabama, Senator, Senate Intelligence Committee. We're told that you've been getting a briefing. What do we know at this hour, Senator?
I've had a partial briefing, but after 4 o'clock this afternoon, I've been told that some people with the CIA and the FBI is going to brief Senator Bob Graham, who is the chairman of the committee. I'm the vice chairman. I was a former chairman. As to the events, what they know up to this point, who's responsible at this point. It's a little premature, but about 30 minutes ago I was talking to some people. Everybody's deeply concerned about what happened. We should be. You mentioned war. This is war. I've said several times that this is a different type of war. It has no boundaries. We've been pushing the intelligence committees for 7 years now that I've been on the committee to do everything they can, and I think we've got to do more. But my first thoughts, Tom, go out to the families. You know, this is a terrible, terrible day for America. It's a wake-up call, though.
And what do we do after we get the wake-up call in terms of how this country must change? Obviously, security at airports will have to be tightened considerably when you have 4 planes taken, including one from the nation's capital. What else is going to have to happen?
Well, that's one, and I think we can do much better around the airports. I think we've come a long way with security. We're an open society. We want to stay that way because that's what makes this country great. We cannot hunker down and live in bunkers. We will not, I predict. But I think we can do a lot more. I'm waiting the briefing as to see if there was any inkling, any warning whatsoever. If not, then this was a heck of a well-executed, dastardly deed today. And I'm afraid it'll be more.
And that's the other question I was going to ask you in that partial briefing. Did you get any assurance that the worst seems to be over?
No, they wouldn't say that. They would be very careful as to saying what would come next because nobody knows that. But we are on alert. The President has put the military on alert all around the world. That's good. I guess we're going to have to stay on alert to some extent, be alert to possibilities because this is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now.
Is the President going to have to stay out of Washington for 24 hours?
I don't know. I'll leave that up to him. He will be advised by the people who give him security warnings and so forth. But I think sooner or later the President will come to the Capitol. He should come to the Capitol and reassure the American people. But that will be up to him, Tom.
All right, Senator Richard Shelby, Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, thank you very much for being with us today. We'd like to be able to talk with you again if we can after that 4 o'clock briefing. I know you can't give away details, but if we can invite you back, Senator, we'd like to do that. Let's go to NBC's Campbell Brown now, who is covering the White House from outside the fence. Campbell?
Well, Tom, we don't know where the president is right now, and that is, of course, deliberate given the security concerns. They are going to great extremes to protect him at this moment. He started off the day in Florida, then flew to the Barksdale Air Force Base, which is in Louisiana, near Shreveport, North Louisiana, and it was there that he made a statement reacting to the attacks this morning. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense.
Now, Tom, we are told that the president took off from Barksdale Air Force Base for an unknown location. There are any number of places that he could have been taken. The most likely is a series of command centers that are set up across the country, all over the country, that are essentially communication centers where the president could speak with the military, where he could have access to the latest intelligence information. And the military officer who travels with the president at all times, this is the military officer who carries the nuclear codes, he also has a database with him of all of these communication centers around the country. All of them, or most of them rather, underground, where the president can both be protected and have that access, the most advanced electronics equipment that could give him access to his entire team, whoever he needed to talk to. Two in particular are worth noting here. One is Camp David. Underground at Camp David, there is a facility there, a special communication center, and of course Camp David is in Maryland along the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. There is another place in that same location, Wayne